What if the fairy tale never truly ended? What if, decades later, love returned with even more power, older, wiser, and deeper? Pretty Woman wasn't just a romantic film, it was a cultural heartbeat. Now, after 30 years, Hollywood's favorite love story is about to write a new chapter. And the world is holding its breath. Asterisk, back in 1990, Pretty Woman wasn't expected to become a classic. But the moment it hit theaters, everything changed. It was more than just a movie, it became a movement. People from all walks of life watched. Vivian Ward, a woman who came from the streets, fall in love with Edward Lewis, a wealthy and closed-off businessman. But it wasn't just their romance that pulled people in. It was how real it felt. The emotions, the awkward moments, the quiet smiles, all of it made audiences believe that love really could break every rule. Julia Roberts, with her wide smile and fiery spirit, became a star overnight. People couldn't stop talking about her role. She wasn't just playing Vivian, she was Vivian. And Richard Gere, calm and classy, showed that even a man buried in work and money could still open his heart. The chemistry between them was so natural, many thought they were truly in love. Their connection lit up the screen and brought tears to millions. The story was simple but powerful. A woman who had nothing is treated with kindness for the first time. A man who had everything learns that money means nothing without someone to share it with. It wasn't about perfection, it was about two broken people healing each other, and that idea stayed with fans for years. People quoted lines from the film, dressed up like Vivian for costume parties, and replayed that unforgettable scene where Edward stands in the limo holding a bunch of flowers, ready to rescue the woman who changed his life. From the streets of Hollywood Boulevard to the penthouses of Beverly Hills, Pretty Woman made people dream. It gave hope. It told women they were worth something, no matter where they came from. And it reminded men that love wasn't weakness, it was the greatest strength. Even today, people rewatch the film when they need comfort or when they want to believe in second chances. What's more amazing is that Pretty Woman didn't age out of pop culture. New generations found it. Streaming platforms brought the story to millions who weren't even born in the 90s, and somehow, the charm still worked. The film didn't rely on special effects or huge action scenes, it relied on feeling. That's why it survived. That's why it still matters. And then, for years, fans asked, will there be a sequel? At first, the answer was no. Julia and Richard moved on with other roles, other lives. People said it's better to leave a perfect story untouched, but the longing remained. People wanted to know, what happened after the fairy tale? Did Vivian and Edward live happily ever after? Did life get messy? Did love fade or grow stronger? Now, in 2025, we're finally going to find out Pretty Woman 2 is real. And it brings back everything we loved, but with new meaning, deeper emotions, and the same actors who once stole our hearts. Julia Roberts and Richard Gere aren't just back, they're better, wiser, and more emotional than ever before. But before we explore their return, we must first remember why we fell in love with them in the first place. Because Pretty Woman didn't just show us a love story. It showed us that love can happen when we least expect it, and that sometimes the most powerful fairy tales are the ones that never truly end. Asterisk, it began with a whisper, a quiet rumor that felt too good to be true. One blurry photo, a half smile. From Julia, a familiar profile of Richard Gere in a suit. And Hollywood exploded. No one believed it at first. But within hours, one truth became clear. The fairy tale was coming back to life. For over 3 decades, fans had hoped, imagined, and even written their own endings to Pretty Woman, but no one truly expected a sequel. In a world where classic films are often left untouched, the idea of returning to Vivian and Edward's story felt like a dream. That dream suddenly turned real when a grainy image leaked from what looked like a movie set. In the picture, Julia Roberts stood on a city street, her red curls unmistakable, and Richard Gere walked beside her. No words, no context. Just one moment, and it was enough to light a fire. Social media caught on like wildfire. Hashtag Pretty Woman 2 started trending in under 10 minutes. News sites rushed to confirm the image. Paparazzi surrounded the area, hoping for another glimpse. Longtime fans cried. Some simply sat in silence, scrolling through reactions, hearts full of memories from 1990. Could it really be happening? And then came the official announcement? A short press release, but it said everything. Julia Roberts and Richard Gere reunite in Pretty Woman 2, the emotional follow-up to the original story. Coming 2025? No screaming, no huge stage reveal? Just a quiet sentence, and yet it shook the entire industry. Julia Roberts later said in an interview that she never thought she'd return to Vivian Ward. "I didn't want to touch it unless it meant something," she shared, her voice soft with emotion. "But when I read the script, I cried. It felt like Vivian had been waiting for me, and I needed to hear her voice again." Richard Gere echoed that feeling. "Edward always stayed with me," he said. "He was unfinished business. We all need second chances. I think Edward and Vivian do too." His words weren't just about the characters. They spoke to something deeper about time, love, and the rare chance to relive something beautiful without trying to repeat the past. Fans around the world responded with overwhelming love. Old fans dusted off their DVDs, younger audiences, who had only seen the original on streaming platforms, began sharing fan theories and fan art. For one brief moment, it felt like time had folded in on itself. The 90s were alive again, but with a touch of something new. Something wiser. Hollywood, of course, watched with wide eyes. Studios that had passed on romance-heavy sequels suddenly began rethinking their strategies. Streaming giants scrambled to secure the distribution rights. But none of that could compete with the real story, two legendary actors stepping back into a world they helped create. Not for money, not for fame, but because the story still had something left to say. There's something magical about seeing older characters return, not as perfect versions of their past selves, but as people shaped by time. Pretty Woman 2 promises that kind of depth, and it all started with one unexpected photo. One quiet moment that proved, even after decades, some stories aren't finished. They're just waiting for the right time to be told. Asterisk time didn't forget them. It just gave them space to grow apart so they could one day find their way back. Vivian Ward and Edward Lewis were never supposed to be a perfect fairy tale. They were human. And in Pretty Woman 2, they returned not as the same couple we once knew, but as two people carrying the weight of everything that happened after the credits rolled. The sequel doesn't pick up where the first film ended. Instead, it moves forward just like real life does. Vivian didn't just step into a mansion and become a trophy wife. She left Edward not out of anger, but to discover who she really was. She went to school, she struggled, she cried. But she built a life. On her own terms. She owns a small but successful business now, a boutique near Venice Beach, filled with handmade clothes and laughter. Her past is still there, tucked behind every strong smile, but it no longer defines her. Edward, meanwhile, stayed in his world of polished shoes and boardrooms. But success without love becomes empty. After his wife passed away years ago from a long illness, Edward closed himself off again. The man who once opened his heart for Vivian buried those emotions all over again. He's older now. His steps are slower. But inside, he's still searching for something real. Their paths cross again in the most unexpected way. Not through a planned meeting, not through fate's grand design, but because Edward's company is trying to buy the block where Vivian's shop stands. It's supposed to be just business. But when Edward walks into that little boutique and sees Vivian behind the counter, something stops. Time holds its breath. And for a moment, they're both young again, but this is not a story about picking up where they left off. This is about starting again, knowing what love costs, knowing how hard it is to forgive, and realizing that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is another chance. Vivian isn't the same woman who once relied on others to save her. She's powerful in her own quiet way. And Edward isn't the same man who could fix everything with a credit card. He's lost things, real things. And now he's the one who needs saving. The plot explores themes we rarely see in romantic films. Regret, aging, the pain of time passing. It shows that sometimes love doesn't come back to rekindle what was. It comes to build something entirely new, something deeper. There are new characters too. a daughter who doesn't know the full story. A young man in Vivian's life who doesn't understand why her heart still aches for a man from her past. And a city that has changed so much even the rich now feel like strangers. All of it comes together to test what Edward and Vivian truly mean to each other. But amid the tension and the tears, there are soft moments that remind us of who they were. The way Edward still looks at her, even when she pretends not to notice. The way Vivian still smiles when he stumbles over his words. These are not the wide-eyed lovers from the 90s. These are two souls who've lived, lost, and now, maybe, found their way back to something worth holding on to. In Pretty Woman 2, the romance isn't loud. It's in the silences. In the shared memories. In the way two hands find each other across a table, not because they're supposed to, but because after all these years, they still want to asterisk before the cameras rolled, before a single line was spoken. Julia Roberts stood quietly on set wearing Vivian's boots once more. The sun was rising behind her, and for a second she closed her eyes, as if reaching across time to find the woman she once played. That's when everyone realized this wasn't just another film. This was personal. Behind every frame of Pretty Woman 2 is a wave of emotion that even the cast and crew didn't expect. The first day of shooting was filled with quiet nerves. Not because they doubted the film, but because they respected the legacy it carried. Director Sarah Fletcher, who took over from the late Gary Marshall, paused the first scene just to say, "We're standing on sacred ground," and it was true. Vivian and Edward's story wasn't just a Hollywood hit, it was a memory millions had held onto for decades. Julia admitted in a behind-the-scenes interview that she cried after the first take. "I wasn't acting," she said. "When I looked into Richard's eyes, it felt like no time had passed. But also, everything had changed." That mix of nostalgia and raw feeling shaped the entire set. Richard Gere, always composed, was seen holding Julia's hand before one emotional scene, his face softer than fans had ever seen. The crew kept things simple. No green screens, no massive effects. Just honest storytelling, intimate lighting, and spaces that felt real. Vivian's boutique, for example, was built from scratch, based on sketches Julia herself helped design. Every detail down to the paint color and folded scarves had meaning. "Vivian earned this life," Julia said, "and I wanted that to show in every corner." One of the most talked about scenes during filming was a quiet dinner between Edward and Vivian, no dialogue. For over a minute, just the sound of cutlery, glances, old smiles. The director called it a love scene without touch. When they watched the footage back, the room fell silent. Even the crew wiped their eyes. Gary Marshall's presence was felt throughout. His son, Scott Marshall, served as co-producer and shared memories of his father's vision. Dad always said the real magic in Pretty Woman wasn't the dress or the hotel, it was the heart. He believed in stories where people change each other just by being kind. To honor him, the final scene of the sequel includes a subtle tribute, a shot of Edward walking past a theater named the Marshall. Julia and Richard both smiled through tears when they filmed it. Even the extras, many of whom were fans of the original, felt the weight of being part of something legendary. One background actor who worked in the boutique scene said, "I grew up watching this film with my mom. Now I'm standing in it. It's like being inside a dream I never wanted to wake from." The energy on set wasn't one of pressure, it was of purpose. Everyone knew they weren't just continuing a story, they were closing a circle. Pretty Woman 2 is not a reboot, it's not a cash grab sequel. It's a reflection. A mirror held up to time, love, loss, and second chances. As early clips made their way into private screenings, critics were stunned. One reviewer said, "It's not just a love story, it's a homecoming." Another wrote, "Hollywood always tries to chase nostalgia, but this feels earned." Julia's final words in a behind-the-scenes featurette say it best. "We didn't come back to repeat something. We came back to finish something. Something beautiful."